Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, and greetings from Londontown, where I find myself officially starting my summer antics for the 2026 season, and where I found inspiration for this week's compilation episode. From early episode with crime writer Leye Adenle to last year's conversation with activist and social entrepreneur Lavinya Stennett, we'll hear a range of Pan-African perspectives on how London is local for these guests, and all of which happen to be writers as well. Social entrepreneur, investor, and author of We Don't Need Permission, How Black Business Can Change Our World, Eric Collins shares perspectives as an immigrant from the U.S. to the U.K. Lawyer, international development consultant, journalist, politician, and author of Love Does Not Win Elections, Ayisha Osori helps us to understand home as presence. Award-winning author of Easy Motion Tourist with a forthcoming new series due to launch this year with Fall from Grace, Leye Adenle shares about his London before experiencing it as a writer. As a lux-preneur herself, award-winning luxury business consultant Elizabeth Solaru, author of best-selling book Opulencia and LUXpreneur, How to Start and Build a Successful Luxury Brand, is taking us along with her in her experiences transitioning from a career in the sciences to getting down to business. Architect, artist, and multifaceted creative Robertson Ahomka-Lindsay shares how his talents from design to music help to give his London life an artistic flair. And finally, founder of The Black Curriculum, filmmaker and author of Omitted, the untold Black history lessons we need to change the future, Lavinya Stennett helps us to understand effective organizing techniques for impact. So, if you haven't already settled in, mind the gap and take a seat. This tube ride is ready for departure through London.
And I grew up in the shadow of North Carolina A&T State University, as well as Bennett College, the oldest Black women's college in the United States. So for me, the South has been very informative of the kind of person that I am. In addition, I live here in London. So I've been living in London since 2014.
And what is your craft?
You know, my craft is really the catalytic inputs for underrepresented people in a variety of areas. So when I say catalytic inputs, normally what we're doing is I'm an investor simply, and I invest capital, which is pooled capital from third parties, into companies that have growth potential and to be able to return according to the metrics that are most important. And for my company, the most important metrics are that you can return capital at a very high rate. And then the secondary piece is that you can actually create jobs that are future resistant. So that's what I do generally on a day-to-day basis, but the same kind of basic structure and the same sort of infrastructure which exists, i.e. catalytic capital that's being used or catalytic resources which is being used in order to get to some type of an outcome which is currently not present in the world. We also use that same thing in terms of social justice. We use that same thing in terms of the arts. So there are a variety of areas in which we then try and infuse resources to get outcomes that are game-changing.
I have so many questions based on that statement, but let's dive a little bit more into your local and where you're from and how you ended up here in the UK from that path. So tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to really kind of engage in your craft and how those roots were sown in the US.
So I come from an interesting family. So my family is a family that has had a continuous family reunion for 70 years. So multi-generational. I come from a family that has lived almost in the same spot in the United States for almost 300 years.
Wow.
It is just we're a very small space that we come from on the eastern shore of Virginia, which is right on the Atlantic Ocean, and it's split, and the land separates the Atlantic Ocean from the Chesapeake Bay, and it's very isolated, it's very rural, and it's very poor, but that's where my family has been for 300 years until this last generation, which is my father's generation, which is when they moved away. Many of them moved away. One or two stayed, but most of them moved away. In any case, that is where I am from. From that space, though, my father originates. And my father leaves that space in order to go to university and study, moving from the family farm to then study agriculture and become a botanist and get his PhD in plant physiology, and then to teach, and then to join a commercial organization that was a European company back in the 1970s. He was an executive for a Swiss chemical company out of Basel, Switzerland. So I have a father who, when I was a child, we were going to the airport to put him on a plane so that he can fly to Europe for his business meetings. And this is a Black executive. So it was, it's kind of doing exactly what my father would have done. It's just I've now I've transferred my location from what was a stateside, and then you do your work in Europe, to a space where I'm actually in Europe, and then I do my work a bit more globally, but mainly in Europe and the UK. That's it. So how did I get here? I think it's natural, right, in that way. So that's one piece. But then I also have been running for the majority of my career fast growth technology companies, ones that are intended to be on the scale and influence of organizations with names like Amazon or Google. Those are the kinds of organizations in which I've worked, but I've worked generally at the C-suite. So I've been very high up in these organizations, and it's been my job to make sure that these organizations don't just survive, but that they thrive and then actually return a great deal of capital to stakeholders. And I've been able to do that on both sides of the Atlantic for about 4 times in a row. And so at one point, someone said to me when I was in North America, well, we have an opportunity for you in the UK. And I said, well, why not? So that's how I came, because it was actually a job. So I came as a worker, I came as an immigrant, I came as a person who also had a short-term view of what was going to happen, and then to return quickly to the United States. But I've been here, as I said, since 2014, and it's now at the end of 2023, so it's almost 10 years exactly that I've been here. Right.
So you describe your father's experience and your growing up experience as though it was like today. And we know that era was very different. And so I wonder if experiencing your growing up in the South, you have this business executive father, and it is still not so far after the civil rights movement started to take hold. And so did you feel somehow sheltered from it? Did you live in it? So I'll give you an example. Because my family is Ghanaian, growing up in the U.S., I never felt like the burden of race in the same way that most Black Americans feel it. I got teased being the African child. You're above all of that. You are, you come from this, that, the other. So I never felt any kind of the inferiority that is kind of rampant in a lot of underserved, under-resourced, marginalized communities. So then you having that experience, and so how would you place that experience in your being able to kind of, I want to say navigate the U.S. in a different way?
It's interesting. My existence, I would say, is replicated by, all the people with whom I grew up. It was an existence that centered around family, centered around, immediate family, extended family, and then chosen families. There was a church family, there was a school family, there was a neighborhood family. And all those families were very, all of these people are many of the people were individuals who had lots and lots of choices as to what they could do and where they could do it. And all of them made decisions to stay in the South. They believed that this is the space which is for us an authentic set of experiences. And this is a space where we can actually prosper, and our children will prosper being here in the South, which I actually agree. There's a writer named Charles Blow who's written a book called The Devil You Know, the New York Times columnist. And it's about sort of why the Great Migration should be reversed and Black people should be moving back from other sort of spaces to the South, which is where you have an accumulation of wealth and other sorts of things. And there has been an infrastructure which exists for, Black activity and attainment. So, in some ways, my family was just an example of that. Having my mother and father having met, mom is not from a Southern family. She's from a Northern family, from Philadelphia. And so having met and married, then they immediately, as a young couple, moved to Alabama and, decided to have children. They, in the height of civil rights, the hotbed of civil rights in the 1960s, early to late 1960s, and to be in Tuskegee, Alabama, which is, a small rural community. And it is an academic community, but sort of set in the middle of, very red Alabama. And, to spend all that time in those places, having to take literacy tests in order to vote, having to do, pay poll taxes and all that. But that was part of the fight, right? If you have some advantages, you take them to the fight, and then you exist within there. And then, of course, you're with all sorts of other academics, and you're with students who are, completely radical, I'm sure, also. And my mother will tell the story that, she's pregnant with me, and pregnant with my brother, and pregnant with my sister. And, they're marching and they're doing other sorts of things. So I've always considered Blackness to be a source of strength, because I always think about other as being a sort of a consciousness that exists. And as that consciousness allows you to do things which are unavailable, and to look at situations in ways that others who are they're unwilling to necessarily view, because the prisms that you have and the sort of, multifaceted approach to viewing what a situation is, and therefore also thinking about problem solving sets and others, are very different if you're Black, and can be more robust if you're Black. You understand sort of how the world works, but then you can understand there are other ways in which we can make things happen. So I've always considered it a source of strength. And I would say that living in Black communities, going to Black churches, I didn't attend Black schools, but, like some population of Black students in each one of the schools that I attended, those were all things that I found to be great sources of strength. My parents were very much Black power, Black beautiful, all that. We're all those people,
Sure.
So it's not, I never felt, and, you're coming from an upper middle class existence. Yeah. So, you're like, the world is, you can buy, you can sell, you can go, you can do,
right.
There's not a limitation in that respect.
Where am I from? Where am I local? Well, I guess I am from Nigeria. Mm-hmm. And where am I local is a very interesting question, actually, because for the last couple of years, I have not spent longer than a year in any place. So 2018, I started out, towards the end of 2018, I was in Senegal, Dakar. By mid-2019, I was in Berlin, Germany, spent the year into the pandemic there, then moved to Abuja for another less than a year, and then have been in London for another less than a year. So it's very difficult to say where I'm local, but I will say now something that, when I was younger, I didn't think about. When I lived in New York, I always felt home was, of course, Nigeria, and I would always be making plans to be back there. But now I've realized that wherever I am, however long I'm going to be there, and sometimes I don't know, that place is going to be where I'm local. That place is home. So wherever I am is home right now. So home is London.
Okay. That's good. That's a great perspective, particularly for a stamped and sealed Glocal citizen, because you've been just in the short span of the recent past, you've been in many countries. So what would you say is your craft?
Well, my craft would be, oh my God, another good question. Well, I think my craft is writing. I say I think because I don't really earn any money from writing, but it is the thing that gives me the most joy and fulfillment. So in my brain, since I've been like 6-7 years old, I am a writer, whether it's scribbling down poems or, writing short stories, or even just writing my journal constantly. And I'm dreaming about writing all the time. So my craft is writing, but unfortunately, I've not been able to earn a living from just writing.
Okay. So tell us, what is your first memory of actually putting pen to paper and creating a story?
Funny you said that, because it's been on my mind. I think I can't remember the first that I remember being published. That's easier. So the writing part, not so easy, but the published part, I must have been in class 4, as we call it in Nigeria, which is primary 4. So I would have been 8, 9. Yes, about 8, 9. And a friend, a classmate, Andrea Ahime, who I've lost touch with. And if she happens to be listening, I'm looking for you, Andrea. Andrea Ahime and I wrote a poem that was read out to the entire school. And I remember being so, I don't know what the word is. Shame is not the right word, but so, I guess, abashed that my name was being called out in public to the whole school, that I hid under the table while they were reading my poem. So,
oh goodness. So you turned from the girl who wrote the poem to the girl who hid under the table.
Right, exactly. And but now no more hiding under the table. It's very happy to get the accolades when I can get them. Yeah.
Of course, of course, of course. Oh, that's a lovely story. It reminds me of my writing, right? When I was about the same age, we had a writing competition in school, and we all had to, it was a whole process. We not only, we had to write little books, right? So we wrote a book, had to illustrate it, create the cover and all these things. And I can remember this being my first all-nighter to write this and get it in. And so then fast forward to college and it was all-nighters for whatever. But I really, like, as a 9-year-old, was like, I'm going to stay up all night and finish this because I was so committed to it. And it paid off because I won the award for the whole school.
Excellent.
And got to go on to a citywide, fair, book fair competition. I didn't win there, but just the experience of knowing, I absolutely understand how it feels to just finally, get your words out and people seeing them and appreciating them. So, yeah.
But do you consider yourself a writer still? I mean, are you still?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Right. So in my, similarly to you, I think children is one of the areas where I focus a lot of my attention. So creating content for children and educational, informational content. So we can talk a little bit more about your work in that space, moving on a little bit. So now your craft is writing, but you don't get paid for it, or you're not earning a living necessarily for it. So how did you evolve into the person that you are now so that you actually have the time to claim writing as, I guess, your leisure, but as the person who is the public figure that we know? How did you come to find yourself in that space?
Well, very circuitous route. It's funny. I was just having a conversation with someone just yesterday saying, and to be honest, I don't feel like I've finished evolving yet.
Oh no, never.
So I know well, but sometimes I envy people who know what they want to do their entire lives and do it. And sometimes I think about people like Bill Gates, or I guess who founded Apple? What's the guy's name? Steve Jobs. They found one thing they did, and they did it. They've done it their whole lives. Even though I guess now Bill Gates has branched out into philanthropy, but he did Microsoft for how many decades? But yeah, I wanted to be a doctor, like all good Nigerian children, wanting to make their parents happy. Somewhere towards the end of secondary school, I sort of realized that, medicine would not be a really good fit for me, considering how squeamish I am, and just not really, at that time, I would have said empathetic, in a way that I would think doctors should be. And so I decided to do law. My mom was really traumatized and was convinced that it was just watching too many movies that had glamorized, courtroom drama. That made me want to be a lawyer, because I was a very good science student. I was actually a very good science student. So
sure.
She was like, but you're a natural fit. But yeah, I was happy that I went with my goal. But then, even then, I wasn't a justice warrior that I feel like I am now. I wanted to do corporate and acquisitions, mergers. Those are the kind of things, I read about in the different novels that glamorizes American capitalism and the movies that I watched. So it was all about being a corporate lawyer, doing mergers, taking over companies and things like that. And so I did my university in Nigeria. Then I went to Harvard Law School for my LLM. And I remember being there with classmates who were doing things like human rights law, environmental. And I was looking at them like, who are these strange people? Like, it never occurred to me that I would be interested in that. That I would be interested in that type of law. Like, my whole focus was, corporations and securities. And anyway, fast forward in life, being a Nigerian, I would say, taught me that, being privileged is never enough protection. And the best protection for anyone in any society is that there's general protection for everyone, not just protection for privileged people. And that's really what got me thinking about the space within which I now came into. First, just through volunteering around social issues, and then got an offer to leave the private sector and join the Nigerian Women's Trust Fund, which was a startup at that time. So was the real first substantive CEO of the Nigerian Women's Trust Fund, which has gone from being, a small nonprofit that was getting $20,000 grants to one that's getting $1 million grants today. So very happy to have laid that foundation. But yeah, that was the journey that took me. It was really a personal realization that no matter how privileged you are, especially as a woman, you are not patriarchal society ever really fully protected, not by society, not by your class. As long as you step out of what's expected of you, then you will suffer. Not because you deserve it, because that's what the society demands to keep, women and girls in check.
I think I've always written. I can't remember a time when I wasn't writing. I think it started with love notes that you pass to people in class in primary school. And I think from there, I graduated to full-blown not paying attention to the teacher and just writing crap in the back of my school notebooks. And I'd either be drawing cartoons, with storylines, or I'll be writing short stories. And I've just always enjoyed writing. And I think it's probably because I grew up, surrounded by books. My maternal grandfather had a very extensive library. My parents had a very extensive library. They had a whole room that was the library. And when I was still too young, I remember picking up a copy of Marquis de Sade. And anyway, so I've always been surrounded by books. My father went on to become a publisher. And so my childhood was, the smell of the massive Heidelberg printing machines and paper off cuts and where they did the guillotine, the cutting of the books and all of that. And I remember my very first copy of Gulliver's Travel was from that press. My father had used to print for the University of Ibadan then. So I used to read a lot of the books. And so I don't know. It's just been surrounded by books and, discovering books at a very young age. And also my grandfather, after whom I'm named, also wrote in his time. I have an uncle who wrote, I have an aunt who wrote, I have two aunts who've written. And I've always been surrounded by books. It's in the blood, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Definitely. So that's very interesting. So we know you're in London now. So where were you local growing up? Tell us more about that.
Oh, I'm a total product of Nigeria. Nigeria made me the man into the man I am, into the human I am. I grew up in an amazingly sleepy massive city, Ibadan.
Ibadan, okay.
Yeah. I grew up in Ibadan, did my university, my primary school, my secondary school, my university. Then like most Nigerians, I didn't move straight to Lagos. I actually moved out of Nigeria for my master's. And then later in life, I went back to Nigeria for business. And that was Lagos, and for a long time, there was a 5-year period in my life when I did Lagos, London every month.
Wow.
Which was, they thought I was a cocaine pusher. You should have seen the way. No, seriously, man. Anytime I'm leaving the Lagos airport, Murtala Mohammed, right? Anytime they look at my passport and they see how much I've been traveling, they then look at me. And I was so silly because you're traveling every month. I didn't have any luggage. In fact, after some time, I stopped taking a laptop because I've got a laptop in the house, in the flat in London. So I just didn't want to have to take anything with me, and I was only going to be gone for like 2-3 days in London. Then I'll be back in Nigeria. And they look at me, they look at my passport, and then I lie to you not, they would poke my tummy and say, this one that you're always traveling, what kind of business are you doing? And then I'll be like, listen, I'm in IT, I have this business. What do you mean IT? Computer? We know that people that do computer, they don't travel like you. And God knows how many times they've x-rayed me.
Wow.
I've actually seen what I look like inside, all of me.
So would they literally take you off and take you to the x-ray place? Like the body?
Yeah.
Wow.
Full x-ray, man. Full x-ray.
Wow.
I don't blame them. There's this young guy.
Sure. Yeah.
Who's just flying out of the town of the country every month. What it was is, right? I had the girlfriend then, and the agreement with her was she would let me go off and do this business in Nigeria if I would come back to her every month. So I had a business in Nigeria that I was trying to a startup. But the only way I was allowed to be doing that was to go back to London, spend a weekend with her, go back to Nigeria, go back to London, spend 1 week in London, go back to Nigeria for a month. It was, oh man, it was, I hated airports. I couldn't stand the thought of going to an airport.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, we later married, and then
okay. Well, it was worth it then.
Yeah, and then I thought, well, now that we're married, you got what you wanted. I don't need to come to London every month. Then I stayed in Nigeria for 6 months, and that ruined the wedding, the marriage rather.
Okay, got it. So that's so interesting, because that is kind of the epitome of Glocal citizenship. Like, you were back and forth for work, for this business. So just tell us, just to veer off, you were doing a startup. So we talk about business quite a bit on this podcast. Tell us a little bit more about that process. And, we know you're an author now, but that was something that was a long-term endeavor, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, it was, oh man, it's crazy. I haven't spoken about this in years. Mm-hmm. I'm talking close in like 15 years ago now,
Oh, wow. Okay.
10, 15 years ago, I think. Let me try and remember.
Yeah.
I don't do well with dates, but
okay.
I got married in 2010, I want to say.
Okay. So yeah, like 10, 15 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it was about 10, 15 years ago. So what it was, I had come up with this idea then to run a lottery in Nigeria via SMS. We didn't have smartphones then. There was no 2G, 3G, or 5G that some people for some reason think is causing COVID-19. Anyway, so I got this idea to run a lottery via SMS. So I went off and I bought 2 GSM modems. Like your normal modems you connect to phones, right? To computers, but it takes SIM cards.
Right.
And then I built you would not know it if you look at me now, but I used to be a computer nerd.
Okay.
So I built a piece of software, a piece of lottery type software. And the way you play it is via SMS. Okay. So I set it up. I set up a computer in my house as a modem, as a server. I had 2 GSM modems connected, one to receive and one to send responses, right? I got in touch with a bunch of friends in Nigeria, and they thought, wow, that's exciting. Let's do it.
Right.
And before you know what's happening, I was on a flight to Lagos. Got to Lagos, we got a Nigerian Lagos State Lottery license. Okay. We got MTN Nigeria was the only worthwhile network. They only had 2 million subscribers then. Can you imagine? They signed an exclusive deal with us. We got, I want to say First Atlantic Bank. I believe that's the bank. They gave us a 30 million naira overdraft facility so that we could pay out people without having to wait for money. It was amazing. We did the pilots with MTN. It was going great until one morning, I'm in my office. Right now, I'm cutting out a whole load of the story because I'm saving it for my autobiography.
Okay.
Anyway, one morning, I'm in my office in Dolphin Estate, and I get that this is dispatch rider from MTN comes over on a bike, has come to give us this letter. And the letter basically says, due to a change in Lagos State lottery and gaming and betting laws, all former holders of, lottery licenses have had their licenses revoked. And for that reason, we can no longer continue our relationship with you.
Wow.
I'm like, what the hell? Yeah.
Wow. And you heard it from MTN, not from them.
Well, actually, I heard it first from the son of the family that did it, but I thought it was just bullshit. And he said to my face in his house the night before, my family is going to make sure we're the only ones who can do a lottery in Nigeria.
Where am I from? Easy answer is London, but my parents are Nigerians. My craft is what you've described. I do a number of things, but right now I am working as a luxury consultant, and local to me is London.
Okay. And so tell us more about your Nigeria. I know you're from London, but I always like to kind of go into some more of the local. So one question is, where is your Nigeria? And then where is your local in London?
Okay. So Nigeria, Lagos. I was born in the UK, taken back to Nigeria when I was about 10, educated in Nigeria, which was beautiful, lovely experience. Then came back to London to train as a scientist and worked in the NHS, etc., etc. And when I came back to London, initially I lived in Paddington, which is very near the hospital where I trained, St. Mary's. And then I moved to Pimlico. And then now I am based in North London. So that's my local. So it's been London, London, London. And in terms of my Nigerian parentage, many will identify with their love for education, their love for hard work, the preaching, the Christian upbringing, the discipline. And also, as the firstborn girl child, what I call the parentification of the firstborn girl child. So everyone can identify with that. And so that's it in a nutshell.
I like that, the parentification of the firstborn. It is so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not the firstborn.
Okay.
Thankfully, but my sister has that in her.
So you grow up to be bossy, you grow up to take charge, and sometimes you have a hard time accepting help yourself because this is your role. You think for other people, you carry the burden to the point where if someone goes, let me relieve you, you're like, no, the burden's mine. So so there's a lot there's a lot of that that I've noticed and I've seen sometimes in certain communities. And it seems to be a universal thing. So not just, it seems to be a universal thing. So yeah.
I mean, it has a lot to do with our kind of how our universal culture, I believe, how our universal cultures have defaulted to a patriarchy. And so, it is these traditional quote unquote roles. So you're automatically grooming a firstborn girl to replace or be that mother. So, interesting. But it's also, the strength of it is the leadership.
Yeah.
So that's the other side. There's the patriarchy side, and there's the matriarchy side. So what do you do? So you're a scientist.
Yes. By training, I'm a microbiologist. Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So you mentioned by training, and did you ever work in microbiology kind of as a practitioner? Like what was your experience in that?
Oh, absolutely. I worked with we call it the National Health Service. So it's the biggest healthcare provider in the UK and it's free at the point of contact. So I worked in a number of hospitals in and around London and outside of London for at least 13 years. So I did work in a lab and that realization that there's got to be more to life than being a lab rat because I was a naturally introverted, very shy child. I loved books. I still love books, absolutely love books. And my dream was to become a professor of microbiology. And in fact, I did get a PhD. I did get onto a PhD program.
Yeah.
But I remember having this thing in the lab thinking, there's got to be more to life than being a lab rat. I need to do something different. But I didn't know what that different was. I remember just impulsively, it was a conversation that went too far with a colleague. And I just thought, no, this is it. So I resigned on a Monday. And then on the Thursday, I was walking past the phone in the lab. It rang. I picked it up and the person at the other end said, look, we are a locum agency. We place scientists all over the country. Would you like to work for us? And I was like, wow, because when I resigned, I didn't have a job to go to. And that was how I got this job that took me all over the country. And it enabled me to enroll on an MBA program because I thought MBA means business. And if you want to do business, my Nigerian mind, I was thinking you do another degree. So let me just do an MBA because I'd heard wonderful things about an MBA. So I enrolled in an MBA. So I had that money coming in so I could sponsor myself. And that started the second part of my journey into becoming a headhunter. So it wasn't the MBA. I remember I'd done about 3 months and I was thinking, hang on, this is not going to get me, this degree by itself is not going to get me what I want. I need to, because I realized I didn't have any contacts, because you're a scientist working in a lab.
Right. Yeah.
You don't network. I mean, you network with your colleagues, but I was thinking, oh my God, for the change I wanted in my life, this is not going to do it for me. So I started networking. I just put myself out there. And somehow I found myself, and I still don't know how it happened, I found myself attending a job hunting workshop for C-suite executives. So, and I'm thinking, but I'm not C-suite, right? So I'm thinking, I can't remember how I got into it. I remember talking my way onto it. And the guy who was running the program, I loved what he was doing. I loved his energy. He was a headhunter heading up a really big practice at the time. And I would go to a lot of his workshops. I'd even bring my classmates. I'd bring more people. You need to hear what he's saying about getting a job after your MBA. So, and then about a year later, once I'd finished my MBA, he then taps me on the shoulder and he goes, I'm actually setting up my own headhunting firm. Would you like to join me? And that was my first breakthrough into the headhunting world.
Wow. That's an interesting just twist and turn of events. Very interesting. So you went into headhunting, and was it specifically for a certain sector, or it was kind of just across the board? What was that about?
Great question. It was across the board. So it was public sector, a little bit of private sector, charity, and then also non-government NGOs, non-governmental, whatever they call them, organizations. So I had a good grounding across the board. And the roles were really varied. My very first role, I remember, was a finance director role. And my boss used to say, we do headhunting for the doomed and the dying, because these were organizations that maybe the organization was doomed, or maybe they were on their last legs, or maybe they tried recruiting themselves and they couldn't attract anybody. Because a lot of organizations misrepresent themselves, and a lot of people misrepresent themselves. So I was a matchmaker. So I was, look, manage your expectations. I know you think you're an amazing employer, but that's not what we're hearing in the market. And as a view candidate A, we've done a bit of digging into you. You're amazing. So there was a bit of matching, like when you're trying to match a man and a woman, or two people, or two men or whatever on a date, and you're like, you're looking for good arms, you're looking for height. Guess what? You got to take what you can get.
Right.
So there was a lot of that going on, and there was also a lot of training of candidates. So even if you're a chief exec, it doesn't mean you know how to put together a great CV. It doesn't mean that because sometimes when you're interviewing people, you get to see things like their body language, you get to see the energy, you get to see the aura. I remember my very first ever role, which is a finance director role. The guy walked in and I thought, oh my God, this is a disaster. He looked awful. He was mumbly. It was just awful. But on paper, he was a brilliant. I mean, when he gets started talking about what he does best, he was amazing. So I don't know how I did it, but I found an actor friend who was very much about helping you to project, helping you to talk. And so I found him. He also had a stylist friend. So by the time we went to work on some of the candidates, even the final panel were like, Elizabeth, where did you find these candidates? And there was somebody on the panel who knew the guy, and he said, who saw the transformation? It was like, what? I couldn't even say why. But I had to do what I had to do so I can get paid, so I can get my commission.
Yeah, right.
So yes, I know I did a nice thing, but I was thinking, if they don't appoint, this is a failed job. Right. And I'm not. Wait, so I think there's something about that grittiness that took me and made me a success in that field. And then I was able to take that into the other things that I did.
I'm an architect, but I can still say in some conversations, I'm a photographer, or I'm an artist,
sure,
and creative painter. And it's interesting because I've been in different social realms where everyone's saying who they are. I know it's what they work. There is this work, I'm this and this, but actually that's not necessarily true because you're more than that.
Exactly.
That's just a term. That's just a box.
Exactly.
And some people like to be put in boxes, or people put people in boxes. But it took me a while to actually acknowledge that it's not just that, and there's other things. There always used to be a term that I used to hear: a jack of all trades and a master of none. But it was never finished, that saying, because to say it's a jack of all trades and a master of none, it's often said to be better than a master of one. First in relation to this, several things you can do.
Yeah.
I suppose I just remember my father used to encourage us to do different things, whether it's playing music or guitars, pianos, etc. Got that at a young age, or sports. I also used to be quite athletic in my youth. Our rugby, cricket.
You mean yesterday?
Athletic. Yeah. so you do that as well.
Yeah.
But no, it just feeds, all part of it just feeds me. So
sure.
And the more that I embrace it, I find that it's more balanced.
Yeah.
More balanced.
Yeah.
With the creative photography, I do like painting. I remember there was a colleague of mine, and I just had my laptop open. I had some images, and it's like, oh, what's that? And I was like, oh, forget about it. It's like, no, what do you mean? You need to share. And I ended up doing I went for an exhibition in Greece. I managed to get a deal. I got a gallery space in central London for about a week free.
Okay.
They were looking for someone, and somebody had just bailed out, and I had to fit in slots. I had like 20 of my pieces, and I kind of showed from that.
Wow.
So I gave them a talk about what it was, and you'll see some of my imagery, but I take light that comes from a source, whether it's also a building or stock light, and I draw with it, like calligraphy. So you see a lot of these sculptural forms, kind of like X-ray, but using light. The interesting part of it is that light, when you bring it together, becomes white, but when you split it, you get different colors.
Yeah.
And what I looked into that is that for me, it was also a projection of one's spirit. Because a lot of light you see, you don't know, most of the stars that we see, in fact, are no longer there. Their light has reached us. That actually shows their journey.
Yeah.
So if you look that into yourself, we also have different journeys.
Yeah.
And different experiences also come together.
Yeah.
So that's what was part of my art of particular work.
So what did you call that exhibition?
It was actually like the light journey, expressions of light. And it was, for me, it was my first. It was like a challenge actually, because I didn't know how people perceived it, but I was really edified by how what they were describing and how it touched them. Some people,
and that's the beauty of art. Yeah.
I like to sometimes be a fly door on the artist, people describing.
Sure.
I heard there's a few people from the architectural profession have come and said, "Oh yeah, I recognize this. Maybe it's like computer manipulation. Do this, the abilities go around." And when I was also kind of expressing how I did it, they're like, "Oh wow, it looks like what we do using generated computers to do it." But I said, no, that's basically a technique that I use with the camera. To go, wow. But I'll show you.
Sure, we'll have links in the show notes.
Yeah,
people can kind of get a sense of Robert's work.
So that's in terms of my craft. So that's one aspect. But in terms of architecture, I've had over 22 plus years, or I forget how many years, of experience with that. So I've worked on particular buildings over in UK, also in Ghana, such as T1 airports, Heathrow Airport, Terminal 1.
Oh, okay. So T1 is the first terminal.
Yes, it's the first terminal.
Yes.
interesting now because I know some of the bits I've worked on and now they've changed it. So I was also working for a company that was demolishing what I had done many years back.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it is the expansions there as well.
Sure.
Worked on T5 at the time.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So this is now, this is, okay. So
in London.
let's take a step into your architectural annals. So first of all, let's understand. That is, as you said, kind of a source of your creative self because it was, you were able to merge all of those, kind of tangible interests in art, right? As opposed to like music and all those.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that your father encouraged you to try many different things.
Yes.
A lot of my conversations with Africans is that the parents are like, oh, it seems like he would have encouraged you to just be the architect and not explore these other things necessarily. So how did you land in architecture? I think you kind of alluded to it, but how did you land in architecture?
Yeah.
And then how did you then grow into a seasoned professional?
Interesting, because I suppose my father was a maverick of his time, although he still like West African parents. It's even a lawyer.
Yeah, lawyer, doctor.
So I came from
maybe an engineer.
Engineer, yes.
Yes.
But I came from a big family. I had 3 brothers, 3 sisters, also myself. An older sister becoming a doctor, another becoming a lawyer. So certain things are really kind of picked up. But
sure.
I fell into architecture. I say fell in love. I fell in love with architecture since the age of 9. And that was actually whilst I was at a school over in the UK. It was a boarding school in Bristol, a place called Clifton College. So the same names. But it was in this town called Clifton, Bristol, overlooking the Ayton Gorge. And it had a lot of the old Edwardian buildings. But what I admired with that, it was understanding environments, it was understanding the community. And I was like, okay, this is something that's outside of yourself. So whoever had designed that has the ability to affect people's lives, for better or to the worse. And, that's quite a heavy responsibility. But I was drawn towards that because I understood that we are more than a sum of our parts, and there's things that we would like to leave on. So it was that age, it was at the age of 9 that I kind of understood that responsibility. And of course, from there, going through the journey of making it and going through it, and that's part of the story. But that's where I acknowledged what architecture was for me.
Yeah.
So where I'm from, I am from a place called Jamaica.
Jamaica.
It's
one of my favorite places.
Really? Oh my gosh, I'm happy to hear it because my family were born there, my dad and my mum's parents. And I call it my place, like where I'm from, because I think it's the reference point for my world and how I see things and how I move and who I connect with and how I connect with them. And I think I understand the world through the lens of someone that was born from Caribbean parents. Even though I wasn't born physically there, I was born in the UK. I don't think the UK is my place of home. So yeah. So the next question is where my local.
Where are you local? Yes.
Where am I local? Ooh.
But before you move on, where in Jamaica?
So my family initially are from Portland.
Okay.
But we moved down to St. Thomas.
Okay.
So east side.
Okay. And where are you local?
Where am I local? I am local to wherever there's water.
Oh, so you're a mover and shaker.
I love the water.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But you are based in
the UK for now.
Okay.
I was living in Barbados.
Oh, okay.
But now I'm back in the UK for a bit.
Okay.
And I'm seeing where I'm off to next.
Okay. So where in Barbados?
I was in Christchurch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
that's the capital, right?
It's the capital.
Yeah.
So right next to Oysters where the fish is fried and
I've heard so much wonderful stories about Barbados.
Barbados is not only beautiful, but it has such a strong history.
Yeah.
And you feel that when you're there. So.
Yeah. I got to get there. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So you are A roaming local in the UK.
Yeah.
Which is fine. And so tell us, what is your craft?
What is my craft? That's a great question. I like to piece together arts, creativity, history, education, and infuse it into something. People say that's edutainment. People say that's activism.
Yeah.
I just call it being a human, you know?
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, my craft comes together well when I'm with young people and telling a story that needs to be told, that hasn't been told. Yeah. So I don't know. It's like an infusion of truth-telling in creative ways.
That's it.
Yeah.
I love it. Truth-telling in creative ways. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Because when you say storyteller, I'm like, yes, but truth-telling in creative ways, that's a craft. It is. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so how did you come to now where you are in terms of being an entrepreneur and putting this truth-telling into practice?
Into that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you mentioned it earlier when I started at uni.
Yes.
That's where everything kind of like grew for me. But I always kind of see it as like an incubator period, like things were in gestation whilst I was at uni. Sorry, just before I was in uni, because I went through life outside, kind of like around different communities, seeing different systems work, maybe fail, and have a very kind of like visceral understanding of that, but not have the language to understand what was actually happening. And as soon as I got to uni, I started to then kind of, yes, I could define things.
Sure.
And then when you define things, you get to communicate that to other people, and then you bring people in. So I think probably uni was a place that I found language. And then those ideas and those feelings that I had were able to kind of be brought to life. So Art and African Mind, which was the society that I co-founded with my ex, we put together a space for Black students who didn't have a place on the curriculum, would be gaslighted when they would bring up issues in the university that are very real. So we wanted them to feel like healing and peace. And initially it was supposed to be like, you know, like a very meditative and like restorative space, but it actually was the opposite, because that's not what the students wanted.
So what did they want?
They wanted justice. They wanted to do like campaigns, and we did that with them. And it was such a great experience. Like, we brought so much change with that role. And as I guess the biggest thing that happened out of our mobilizing together, we created the university's first ever position, a parent position of a Black student officer who would basically then advocate for Black students. So there is currently people who are employed in that role because of the work that we did in terms of campaigning and policy making.
That's awesome.
Whilst we were there. So it was a blessing. And I would say from that, it kind of gave me the grounding to want to take that kind of learning outside of uni and start to think about how we can bring change to schools.
Right.
And then that's kind of gone on its own trajectory. But I've had to learn other skills of like how to raise money, how to story tell, and how to be confident, literally, in
all of
talking
that
to people.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about that organism, right? Because when we're young and we kind of click with people around us, it's much easier to bring people together, right? And so you had captive audiences. And so how do you think now, as you grow in your work and taking that experience, what were the keys to being able to effectively organize for this activism?
Yes. So I think first and foremostly, we always had a very clear understanding that organizing is about bringing people together. And as much as we want to get the change, and maybe we as like individual leaders, we know what we want to achieve, it's about listening. So we always had that kind of like space of, guys, like, let's just talk. And it wasn't like a formal thing, like, oh, give, you know, like a survey, like you sit here, I sit here, like tell me the issues, we write it down. That is important. But literally we just gave people the space to vent. And I think ultimately, like, if you're going to get to the base of like organizing and mobilizing people, you need to be clear on what the actual issue is. And to do that, you need people to be honest and feel safe with you in that community. So yeah, our mobilizing looked like parties. It looked like having parties. It looked like just chilling after lectures, organizing spaces outside of university as well for us to just connect. So I think just having the space to just be normal with each
to
other.
figure out how to just be with each other. So then you could then.
This is why we love the word comrade, because it's like, it signifies like, we're more than just like politically minded. We have a shared vision, but it's like, we're also, there's a friendship in there. There's a trust and a friendship in there. So yeah, we were able to mobilize effectively doing that. But then also I would say that we had like the ability to translate a lot of the things that would come out of discussions into actual practical things. Okay. Because sometimes things get
organized.
We're organized.
So then you're organized, right?
Because things get lost sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
And because sometimes with racism, you're dealing with such a broad scope of things, you have to sometimes narrow it down to say, look, let's just focus on this one thing. And maybe that one thing, we need to translate it into just a short campaign that's going to happen over 3 days. And this is the goal that we want to achieve. Or if it's going to be a set of emails, who are we targeting with that? So there was a result that always was very practical and was driven not always with consensus, but with like what we felt would be most effective to get the change that we actually desired. And ultimately people would then buy in as well. So I would say like having a vision and having the ability to actually just kind of just connect with people are the two kind of key things.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcast. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave us a review. We love to hear from you for different suggestions on guests, on topics, on places we should see and people we should meet. Please share. We really enjoy the idea of connecting, and engagement is the name of the game in progress, folks. So let's try to connect. In addition, please do check out the show notes. They have rich content that supports each of these episodes. And if you haven't listened to them before, go back, listen to the full episodes. There's always a wealth of knowledge and information and insights we hope to be sharing in the podcast. So until next time, bye for now.